A naive leader of a young boys outdoors club is named as a replacement for a deceased senator in the hopes that he's too dumb to stop the graft hidden in a bill sponsored by the other senator from his state and the moneyed interests supporting it. But he soon proves to be more of a problem to their plans than they imagined. In the 1939 Frank Capra film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And that's the movie we're digging up this week on Movie Bones.
I can't help feeling that there's been a big mistake somehow. Of course, I never could see why we needed two senators from this state when we have a man like Joseph Harrison Payne representing us already. He probably doesn't remember me. He knew my father very well, Clayton Smith. They went to school together and they're very, very good friends. And so it's to sit here with them is a very great honor for me because I remember Dad used to tell me that Joe Payne was the finest man he ever knew.
Okay, this film, I know, I said last week that I'd seen this movie before and liked it. And I have a bit of a confession to make to you guys out there that I have to confess, in the interest of honesty, that apparently neither of those things turned out to be true. Or at least mostly untrue, because it turns out I only really watched the ending of the film about 15 or 20 years ago. So, that's a long time. But watching the movie now, with all that I've come to learn, especially about government and not just the ideals ends of things, which I knew as a kid, but also like just the sausage making aspect of lawmaking and reading more about political science and all that kind of stuff in general. And I have to say I was a bit disappointed when I watched the whole movie. I guess it was kind of what I expected, but it was, I guess also, I was still left kind of wanting more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I can understand what you're saying there. There was some part of me that was like, let's go deeper into the weeds of government. I also maybe have come into this thinking it was going to be more of a comedy.
Okay.
And it was not. I don't know. It's probably because, and I say that because, there's some older things that I have seen before, like cartoons or, other TV shows, things like that. And I get that things will get parodied and whatnot. But anyways, it has been parodied in such a way that it did come across like it was kind of more comedic, and it wasn't comedic. And that didn't really bother me. I want to make that very clear. But it did make me shift as I was watching the film and everything.
Yeah.
I was kind of having to shift as I was going because I was like, oh, this is something else. And it wasn't very long into it, but I mean, I had to just kind of make my brain change up just a little bit so that I could watch the movie like I should watch the movie.
Match the speed, so to speak,
Yes, exactly.
So you weren't going at, for you folks out there, I'm going to date myself, but you weren't going at 78 RPM and the record was playing at, was it 76 or whatever the other one is.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, I just dated myself big time. All right. So having only watched the ending before and having that part be the part that stuck in my brain all these years is that I knew it was going to be dramatic. And it does hinge on this very kind of moral point where it kind of preys in the hopes that if you just give the right speech in Congress, things are going to turn around. You can actually convince people to go on your side. And boy, have I learned a lesson that ain't true over the years, because I've heard there's been some good speeches on the floor occasionally, not often, but there are. And I have heard them, but they haven't moved any votes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's it appeals to the hope. Anything you want to say to that?
I understand what you're saying. You're right. We do know that some speeches out there, they don't mean anything. I'm not saying this speech didn't mean anything, but recently, actually, a couple weeks ago, one of our congressmen, current sitting congressman,
From my home state, I think, right? Yeah, from my home state of New Jersey, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that your home state was New Jersey. Anyways, but yeah,
I've been around.
he did, he did a filibuster speech. I think it was it's set to be like a minute after or something like that. Then the actual time, and I say actual time for those of you that haven't seen this movie, the actual time of George's speech in the film and everything, which was like 27 some odd hours, something like that.
It did break a record. Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of neat. I'm not playing political sides here. I don't really know what that did other than he had a long speech.
It did draw attention to some things.
It did draw some attention to those things, but like ultimately what happens next, something could happen, or it could just be like, hey, you talked for 27 hours. Good job.
But that is the highlight of the film, really, for me. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in the movie that's kind of on a writer's level. Some of it felt kind of like, not propaganda per se. It is propaganda in some places. This is during World War II. I almost expected them to see like one of those buy war bonds kind of things that you see in the old wartime films, because it did push the patriotism element a little hard at times, really. It kind of got a little bit distracting. I understand why they might have done that historically speaking, but as a film, I have to say it did kind of take me out of it.
But did they mention World War II at all?
No, I don't think they did, actually.
You brought up the fact that, the state that they're from is not named and everything. And I think that's, my personal opinion. As I was watching the film, I'm like, yeah, I guess, you don't want to get close to whoever those state senators are just in case. And you also don't want to like make it look like that particular state does maybe have an actual problem with that kind of stuff. I can get that personally. But, I did think it tried to do its best to be as fictitious as possible.
Tried. I don't know if there's a way to do it that's not going to be distracting. Because after a while, it's kind of like, that thing is back again. And I know why you did it, because it's about the Congress, and what are you going to do? It's like they're actual states, and you're not going to make up a new state for that. I can't imagine what other way you could get around that. But it was distracting, and I can't give it a pass entirely either. It's kind of middle ground for me.
I did kind of, did we even get a president in the film?
No, you never heard mention of the president at all.
And again, I can, since it was more of a Congress thing, I guess I can understand that. Another thing to point out about this kind of film and everything is, it's got to pass through both houses for starters. Then the president has to sign it into law and everything. And then after that, you can challenge that thing. Like that, you can continue challenging that thing all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, if the law itself, and once it's passed, or even, I'm sure there's lots of layers that we're not even aware of. But basically, it's like, you can have a law that's passed, but it doesn't pass the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can ultimately declare it unconstitutional. And that's the checks and balances system that we have for now. It's definitely just focused on the Senate itself, and that's fine too. If for the story it's trying to tell, it's fine. I think I would have appreciated it, first of all, for me, the stakes, the whole idea around this, the big deal around the corruption has to do with a graft bill, a bill that contains graft. I mean, it has a whole bunch of other stuff in it, but it contains some graft, and it affects directly, Jeff Smith's or Mr. Smith's, constituents, and what he feels is important, but what he wants to do himself. It was kind of odd the way they set it up, because there is a natural kind of conflict of interest you can see in both ways. He came to Washington with a certain idea to do this, or is it, I guess, Boy Scouts kind of thing, right? And it just happens to be the same plot of land that the graft is going to build the dam. The biggest complaint I could see about the dam itself was the fact that it was mostly going to benefit one person, or mostly just one company, or whatever you want to call it. If you took that part out of it, just pitting a dam against the Boy Scouts, or whatever you want to call them, it's not really motivating in a big way. You know what I mean?
So this is like one of your first movies out there that truly shines a light on Congress. Not a nice light on Congress, I want to say. This made a lot of people mad.
It did, huh?
Yeah, it made a lot of people in Congress mad at the time, because they would say things like, oh, people in Congress would never do something like that. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, is 2020. And, we're sitting there going, like, I'm sitting there reading this and watching this stuff. I'm like, yeah, this stuff happens all the time, and we know about it. But that's the thing. It's like, you're living in a time period where that kind of stuff is not going to be widely known. It's just how fast news travels in that world. So, yeah, like someone being corrupt, someone being behind the scenes, it's not a surprise to us. That's the thing.
No. I suppose you could say it would be scandalous to a public that had a more, doe-eyed view of the government, right?
Yeah, exactly. And especially right off the heels of something like, World War II or in the
Yeah.
throes of World War II
Especially you're
and
getting all that
everything.
propaganda. It's like the pro-America, virtue versus, good versus evil kind of thing you're
E-
going for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and because, just because that happens, it does take away some kind of, I don't want to say mysticism, but some type of the mystique of this movie. And it's not the movie's fault, but it's just like, it's like, yeah, of course there's corrupt congressmen, duh. It's just because you're living in a world that holds the all of the branches of government to such high esteem, and those same branches of government, it's like, we would never ever be corrupt and everything.
I do want to play something because it touches on this because it's part of what Claude Rains, and Claude Rains is my favorite, plays a favorite character in this role, in this movie for me. But he kind of shows a lot of nuance in this. And let me just play this for you guys.
But you still haven't answered me, sir. Can a man like Taylor tell you and those other men what to do?
Now, listen, Jeff, please. I compromised. Yes. So that all those years I could sit in that Senate and serve the people in 1,000 honest ways. You gotta face facts, Jeff. I've served our state well, haven't I? We have the lowest unemployment and the highest federal grants. But, well, I've had to compromise. I've had to play ball. You can't count on people voting. Half the time they don't vote anyway. That's how states and empires have been built since time began. Don't you understand?
He's not entirely wrong, is he? There is always this DC horse trading, right? And I'm not saying that like everything's tradable. In my mind, as I was writing up today's episode, the thought of A Man for All Seasons came to mind, right? Because there's the idea of someone who has a principle and he's going to hold on to it even to his death, and he's the outlier for that. But the thing is, here's someone who also has a principle, but I get the clear indication that, or an unclear indication as to just how important it is for that this thing not happen in terms of the dam project. If you're doe-eyed about the government, maybe this is the biggest scandal there is.
Yeah.
I just don't think it ages well in that
Well,
particular sense.
you are right. The other thing I was kind of circling around that I didn't quite get to yet is the fact that, because they're taking on such a big task of critiquing the United States government in the way they critique the United States government, I do think that's one of the reasons why we have such a cookie cutter story.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a simple story. It's a very simple story. Like, in all honesty, most people, like, we could make an argument that, like, if someone came to Congress with that, had, like, all of the backing, all of that good stuff, most of Congress, I think most of the whole, like, everyone, just for brownie points for all of people trying to get reelected, most people are going to go with it. They're just going to 100% go with it. But heck yeah, let's do something like that. Honestly, there were times in the movie I was sitting going, why don't we have more stuff like that?
No, I mean, and there are things. I mean, there used to be a lot of things like they're going to name an airport after so and so, and that used to get like they're the easy things, right?
Yeah.
It's like the completely unobjectionable things. Although these days I can't predict anymore. It's getting harder to predict what will and will not be unanimous.
If the movie came out for the first time today, we'd all be going, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, of course, Congress is corrupt.
Nowadays, I really would, and you wouldn't have to even go that far. I think you could almost make it a quasi-documentary, really. Because it's like there's so many more things now. I mentioned before about the Fifth Amendment thing, and about the right to due process, which is a big topic right now, and for good reason. Whether you think so or not, it does affect everybody. It goes to something more fundamental. In the hands of a good director, you could do something nowadays that would be much more substantial in the kind of scandal that is being talked about, almost to the point where you could do, like I said, quasi-documentary on it. And I think it would be much more powerful, especially if you could strip away a lot of like the kind of the propaganda bit for the world. I don't even know if they were in World War II yet. I think was it December 7, 1941 is when we joined. And so it's a little bit before that, but there was still clearly some movement to try and get the U.S. involved, in more patriotic stuff. So that could have been a part of it as well, but it felt like very much a piece of that kind of propaganda era. So if you stripped it of that and you added in more of, like you said, the better motivations, which I think the more clear-cut kind of, this isn't just a graft bill. Sometimes civil rights, the kind that are in the Bill of Rights, those are the hardest to defend because we just kind of take them for granted, right? So I think there's actually a plentiful field to pick from if you wanted to remake this today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you know there's a little bit of a cast crossover between this and Blondie?
Did not know that.
Baby Dumpling is one of the kids, and he's credited as Baby Dumpling.
Wow.
I mean, as an adult, it's like I'm glad I have a real name because because everyone just sees my Baby Dumpling name up there. It's like I'm glad I've got that up there instead of my real name. You know? Of course, if someone recognized you anyway, it's like, but I don't know. But that was one of the things.
What do we call this? The Blondie universe now? Blondie cinematic universe.
Blondie cinematic universe.
Make it George. Make it George.
Make it
something like that.
Yeah, make it. Or I think it's Jeff. But yeah, make it Jeff. It's like whatever. And it's They were just driving me. That was like fingernails on a chalkboard to me, man. I'm telling you. That scene lasted 5 times longer than the running time was. I'm telling you that really punched me in the face. Overall, there's not much I can say about the film except I just don't see myself watching this movie again.
I get where you're coming from.
I mean, this is another Frank Capra film, and it has a lot of his hallmarks. But yeah, go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I have to put this one quite literally belongs in a museum, for a variety of reasons. One, you have your first critique of actual Congress, or at least one of your first real critiques of it, I would say. It wound up being shown in the White House at some point. So yeah, I actually do think belongs in a museum. I think you could watch it once and, say you've watched it. I've never seen a film from Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart, yeah.
Or James Stewart.
We haven't really talked about him at all yet, but is there anything you want to say about him in this? Or
I thought his role was really good. I thought it was well acted. I always enjoy him in everything that I see him in. There's actually a movie that I came across recently. I know this is beside the point. I think it's more of a thriller of sorts, an action thriller. And he was older. I want to see him in that. It's on Tubi. I might bring it up to you eventually. Maybe I wish he could have done more personally, but I thought that final kind of like confession from the senator, not the actual senator, but the senator from his home state. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
So again, I think this is worth one watch personally. But I do think it belongs in a museum for the historical, aspects of all of this stuff.
I mean, yeah, for me, it's like, and Claude Rains, I will give him props. It's like Claude Rains is my most favorite part of this entire film. He's got the most subtle things to work with. He actually sells me on the idea that it's like, you know what? Yeah. If it wasn't for the part that was just one guy benefiting from it, it's like there's a lot of things that I could probably say if I was elected in Congress that I know that I have to have my core set of values that can't be touched, and a whole bunch of other things which I'm willing to like touch in the periphery of. I may not like, or I may object to certain parts of, but I can at least agree in principle on something that's trying to get done. Anyway, that puts it really in the bad dates column for me. It's a once and done. I guess this is the time we'd like to tell the listening audience out there that if you're enjoying this journey along movie lane with us, Ryan and I on our journey, please do like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your podcast purveyor of choice. We'd love to hear from you guys. Give us your suggestions and, communicate with us. We'd like to hear it. On the subject of next week's film, what do we have lined up?
Well, this looks like a really interesting film. Hopefully. I mean, I've never seen it before. But our plot summary, or not plot summary, but our, what Tubi says is a schemer who uses his charm to wed a wealthy older woman stages her death to look accidental, but when no money comes forth, he seeks a new victim. This movie is titled Cast a Dark Shadow, and it is starring, his name is Dirk. I cannot, for the life of me, Bogard,
kind of like, I guess, like Humphrey Bogart, but a different spelling, maybe.
Yeah, Dirk Bogard, Kay Walsh, Margaret Lockwood, and it's directed by Lewis Gilbert. I feel like I've seen something else with Margaret Lockwood in it.
It's possible.
I could be wrong, but the name sounds familiar.
This is a film I know I have seen, and I know I've seen it because I saw it a lot more recently than Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I guess folks out there, we'll see you next week, and enjoy the film with us if you can, and if you can't, just tune in anyway. So we love to have you aboard. So, and we'll see you next week, Ryan.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, folks.